Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Album of the Week video. This is episode number 220. Today, I am here to celebrate the 40th anniversary for The Lord of Flies, the debut full-length album by Cult Swedish Heavy Metal band Axewitch. Originally released through the legendary Fingerprint Records label sometime in 1983. So with all that said, let's begin. The story of Axewitch begins in the year of 1979 when Magnus Jarl, hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, met both Anders Wallentoft and Tommy Brage, hope I'm also pronouncing that name correctly, at a local music store in, I believe, oh boy, Linköping, Östergötland? Hope I'm pronouncing all these correctly. Again, in Sweden, where Magnus worked. These three together would form Hazy, along with drummer Rolf Holmstrom, if I'm pronouncing that correctly too. At the time, they were mostly playing songs by Rush, UFO, and Judas Priest, with some original material peppered in between. They mostly played at their own rehearsal studio, but by 1980, Hazy would split, at least the original lineup or whatever, cause Anders would keep the name and continue using it with a different lineup, whereas Magnus and Tommy would form another band, this time named Iron Haze. Great band name, by the way, okay? But would then soon change it to Black Stone. Aw, not as cool as Iron Haze, really. They tried out several different musicians, but didn't find what they were looking for. Meanwhile, Anders would meet both Michael and Mats Johansson. Again, hopefully I'm pronouncing all these correctly. Inside the music store, they decided to join Anders and Hazy and soon would play gigs in their hometown. Tommy would eventually then rejoin and would soon change the name of the band. Originally, Anders and Michael were both playing guitars, but by early 1981, they persuaded Magnus to join, to which resulted in Anders switching back to just being lead singer, and thus, Axewitch was born. They would immediately write their own songs, as well as playing various covers from either Trust and Judas Priest. They started off playing in their hometown, but soon later would build up a pretty good reputation and started gigging all over around Sweden. By January 1982, they recorded a 3-song demo tape featuring 2 originals, Axewitch and Nightmare, and including a cover of Judas Priest's Beyond the Realms of Death, taken off the very, very iconic classic album Stained Class. The demo tape would receive positive responses from both magazines and record companies, to which both the songs Axewitch and Nightmare would get featured in 2 various Swedish comps in 1982. By the summer of 1982, they would then record and self-finance their debut EP titled Pray for Metal, which eventually went straight in at number 7 as one of the best-selling import metal records in England. This, of course, led to the band to be picked up by Fingerprint Records, who would become known or synonymous for releasing records by both Gotham City and Mercy, Messiah Markolin's previous band. See, there you go. I finally was able to kind of pronounce his name correctly. See, I did it. I see. Dumbass. That's a reference to a completely different story, which I've told before on this channel, but right there, I'm just leaving it in vague, okay? Ooh. See, I can try and at least fuck around and crack some jokes here and there to kind of make things a little bit more entertaining for you all. Okay, back to the story. By July of 1983, they would enter Decibel Studios in Stockholm, best known for holding both Heavy Load and Yngwie Malmsteen, with producers Hasse Engström, hope I pronounced that correctly, and Ole Larsson. Hope I also pronounced that name correctly too, like I've been saying throughout this entire video. Who apparently is best known for working with Torch on their second album, Electric Kiss, Bathory on the two songs that were featured on the Scandinavia Metal Attack Volume 2, and Glory Bells Band on their second album as well. Just to name a few for you all. To record their debut full-length album, The Lord of Flies. It would then be released through Fingerprint Records and be met with, for the most part, positive reviews. So, featuring 9 tracks, clocking in at the length of 38 minutes and 43 seconds, these 9 tracks are beginning with Axe Victim, Just Another Lunatic, High Power, Let the Strings Cry Out, Sinner, definitely not a Judas Priest cover, The Arrival of the Flies, Part 1. Then, of course, the title track, Downtown, and then finally ending with 7 Angels. So there you go, folks. There's your 9 tracks. You know, what can I say? I have a total soft spot for this album. While in retrospect, this may not be the most quintessential metal album to come out of Sweden, or in general, but I still find a lot to enjoy here. It's not as epic as, let's say, your typical album from either Heavy Load, Overdrive, and early Europe, but what is contained here is fun, straightforward rockers that is kind of in the vein of Torch, Saxon, and at times the Michael Schenker group. I almost had Scorpions here, but the more that I really thought about it and listening to some of the songs again, I don't really get the Scorpions vibe. Instead, I tend to really get more Michael Schenker group, and possibly, of course, which is probably where the UFO influence as well comes from as well. Just take a listen to songs like the opening rocker Axe Victim with its hooky riffs and catchy chorus. Then, of course, due to the hot and steady feel of High Power and the very fun, just fun and dumb feel good of Downtown. But the album does push for some epic moments that does fit within the lines of early 220 volt Europe and Overdrive, with those songs being Sinner, the title track, and 7 Angels. The remainder of the album is filled up with 2 kinda useless guitar winkery tracks and a rather lackluster rocker in Just Another Lunatic. Another aspect I like to point out here is that given that the band is fairly young here, the musicianship kinda reflects that, cause earlier this year, Axewitch did release an album of re-recordings, which I reviewed here on the channel. with the bulk of the re-recordings on that album being, well, 5 of the songs being taken off from the album here, The Lord of Flies, shows how much the band has matured over the decades, with the musicianship being a lot more precise and fluent than how they initially sounded here, which in contrast is, I don't know if sloppy is the best word to use, but it is herky-jerky, I think is probably a better word to use here, because it's just a way to kind of summon up the performances that they had or they're playing at earlier on, especially on the EP and of course on this album right here, The Lord of Flies. And it's just not fully realized yet. But that does come down to the fact that the band didn't have enough time in the studio to fix these out, because by the second album, Visions of the Past, they were then beginning to fix out the kinks in their playing by then. But Anders was still not as fluent as he is now as a singer, where he has these days more bass and personality in his performances. Of course, the rough around the edges production of the album here kind of makes this all the more evident, and how they just sounded early on, you know. So in a way, it kind of exposes that a little too much. Because if they actually had the resources and the money to put into better production and recording for, of course, the debut album here, then their performances early, you know, the way they sounded early on here as such a young band, I think would have actually been touched up, and it would have been masked over, and it wouldn't have been so overexposed. That's just the way I re-look at things, the way I'm re-evaluating my overall thoughts, you know, for this album here. Again, this all just comes after listening to that re-recording album, The Last of a Dying Breed. But those are just nitpicks in the end, you know. In the end, it's all nitpicks. So all in all, with all the small technical setbacks and tiny criticisms, I still enjoy this album. So for those who might have heard this album, if you have any thoughts, whether they are positive or negative, you can leave them all in the comment section below. But if you haven't listened to this album or Axewitch, then I do recommend this. Of course, same goes for the EP, Visions of the Past, their comeback album from 2020, and the re-recorded album, especially the re-recorded album, The Last of a Dying Breed. So with that, this is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.